Hello, everybody. This is Infinite News Network in collaboration with Oromia National Media. In our today's program, we'll host Denabo Wario from Wales, United Kingdom, and we'll be discussing about the political crisis in Ethiopia. But before we delve into that, I would like to briefly look at the political atmosphere in Africa these days. So if you look at African countries, in Ethiopia, there are several conflicts that are going on over the last few years. And in Sudan, there is a similar conflict going on between the Sudanese Defense Force and their support forces. That has resulted in the days of over 16,000 people and displacement of millions of people. In other countries such as Nigeria and South Africa, there are relative calm, and the countries are undergoing several democratic transitions. They hold regular and frequent elections. In Kenya as well, similar political atmosphere is uh, at this moment, a similar political atmosphere is ongoing. There is a democratic transition, there is election, and the government is held accountable and answers to the judiciary system of the country in Kenya. So when it comes to Ethiopia, there are several ongoing conflicts, especially in the Oromia state and the Amara state, and previously in the Tigray region. The Tigray region is also hosting unresolved conflicts with regards to the displaced people from the western Tigray region, Olkite and the likes. So generally, when we look at the countries in Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan, Niger, and the likes are hosting conflicts, and there are political instability, but the rest of the countries in Africa have relative calm. So welcome, the Denabo Wario. So today, this program is going to be hosted by ONM, Oromia National Media, and FNN News Network. Welcome, the Denabo.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. Thank you.
All right, so I have points, talking points to guide our discussion today. And so I will begin with recent declaration of the Prosperity Party concerning the political atmosphere in the Oromia state. So recently, the Prosperity Party, which is the ruling party in Ethiopia, ordered its forces to attack members of the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army. That means it wants to subject millions of the uh, family members of the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army to a life of misery. And if the OLF, OLA also responds in kind, wouldn't that bring about a civil war? What is your take on that?
Thank you, Daniel. Before I get to that specific point, I just want to take 1 or 2 minutes to reflect on the point you raised at the beginning about because talking about that also puts our discussion in good perspective, to contextualize about what's going on in Africa and particularly in the Horn of Africa. You raised the conflicts and war raging many parts of Africa, like Sudan, Niger, and even though the degree varies, Somalia is also in some kind of instability. But what we do need to understand is Ethiopia's situation is not comparable to the situation in Sudan or the situation in Somalia. Even some people mention Ethiopia is going down the path of Libya or Syria. I differ on that because when we talk about Africa, many of the problems of African countries are attributed to the fact that Africa has not been decolonized, and even though the Europeans have left Africa behind, the exploitative structure, the exploitative boundaries that they've created, that the Europeans created, has continued, and it has served as main, point of contention. But Ethiopia's is different in a sense that Ethiopia itself was a leftover of the colonial system. Ethiopia was, created, emerged out of that process for scramble for Africa. So effectively, the reason why I'm raising this is the problem that, or the crisis that Ethiopia is facing is in many ways different to the crisis that Libya or Syria or Sudan have faced. The reason why I say that is, if you take Libya or Sudan, the fighting is over the power control. It is not. It is not related to the very nature, to the very structure of Sudan. There's no question about that. If you take Libya, in Libya, the fighting was all over power control. But in Ethiopia, the fight that is Ethiopia is of multiple layer. The cause for the fight is of multiple layer. It is about decolonization. It is the nations that are fighting in Ethiopia are not for the sake of controlling Ethiopia's power machine. It is to liberate themselves, to exercise the right to self-determination. There is no single nation or single group in Syria that is fighting for to exercise the right to self-determination. The same goes for Libya. The same goes for Sudan. So that is what makes Ethiopia's problems. Well, for me, Ethiopia itself is a problem. It is a problem because it is a colonial entity. It's a colonial structure. So it is very important to understand the root causes of the problems, and every country, every empire has got its unique characteristics. But when it comes to Ethiopia, there is one point that needs to be clear is particularly when it comes to the relationship between the Oromo and Ethiopia. It is not about who is going to be in the palace of Ethiopia. It is to address the basic question itself. The fact that Ethiopia has invaded Oromia and has continued to invade Oromia, the fact that Ethiopia invaded Ogaden or other countries in Ethiopia, these are the big questions that need to be addressed. And unless we address that, the rest will be talking about the symptom of the problem. Perhaps we'll get to that. Coming back to the point you mentioned about the PP Prosperity Party declaring what they've declared, there are two things I take from that. The first one is the Prosperity Party itself is illegal. It has put Ethiopia's sovereignty, internal sovereignty, into question, because the Prosperity Party took control of the power machine even before they were legally registered, before they were legally established as a political organization, as a political entity. It was after they controlled the power that they got registered in the National Election Board. And that is one. And second, the second thing that we need to see with that is, because they've controlled the power illegally, they would do anything to stay on power. With regard to the declaration they've made, I think for me, they are reaffirming what they have already declared and what they have already been implementing, what they have already been doing. I'm not really surprised when they people for granted. They think people forget. As Abiy Ahmed repeatedly says, these people are idiots, and the word he used is people of short memory. People are not of short memory. People know and see what is going on, and with regard to the killings, with regard to trying to eradicate the ONF, it was back in 2020, December 2020, that Abiy Ahmed, as we raised here repeatedly, said in a televised speech in Kenya that his government and Ethiopia were determined to eliminate the ONF. And a few weeks later, in the parliament, they clarified, or they explained how they were going to eliminate the ONF. And they said, we will eliminate the ONF by eliminating the Oromo people. And I mean, that's their word. So they are trying to reaffirm they are trying to inculcate in everybody's mind that Ethiopia is determined to eradicate ONF, and the only way they can eradicate the ONF is by wiping out the Oromo. So just to put it in context, all the killings, all the atrocities that have been going on fits in that grand strategy of Abiy Ahmed. So they might have their own reason to declare every now and then, as if they haven't declared it before, as if they're not doing it, depending on the atmosphere, whenever they want to deceive the people, or perhaps they want to tell the international community as well that the Ethiopia's government, they don't care about global order, and they don't care about global norms, and about the values of human rights and what have you. So I think that's the way I view what they're doing, and part of it also comes from desperation. They're so desperate. They now, the Prosperity Party, but like I said, everybody knows that there are a group of gangsters that happen to control the state machine, and they want to continue to control the state machine at any cost. And with regard to Abiy Ahmed, he has been completely rejected by the Oromo. That's why they're trying to tell others and tell the world, oh, look, these thousands of people have come out to welcome us in Welega or in Finfinne. Perhaps they will continue to do that. But the fact of the matter is, they have already declared what they wanted to do, and it is only because they are incapable of wiping out the Oromo because of the defense, because of the challenges they encountered from the Oromo Liberation Army.
What do you think would be the outcome of their declaration? Wouldn't that result in the Oromo Liberation Army also responding in the same way, targeting the government officials? Wouldn't it be dangerous for the government itself? Why did they eventually did that? Like, if they target family members of the OLA can also target the government officials. Wouldn't it be disadvantageous to the government? Right now, to now, the focus is on the military mechanisms of the government that the OLA has been targeting. But once the government has declared to attack family members who have nothing to do with what is going on, the resistance movement, wouldn't that initiate some kind of civil war or a tit for tat kind of response from the OLA side as well?
Well, the reason why they publicly declare what their intentions are, perhaps they want to inflict fear on the society. They want to force people to surrender. They want to gain, whatever they want to gain from the population. Apart from that, what they said they were going to do, they have always been doing it. This families whose member were suspected to have been involving in the Oromo Liberation Army have always been targeted, for years and years. Even, mothers who were accused of, who were perceived their children might have joined the Oromo Liberation Army have been, murdered. The cases could go on and on. They look. This is their modus operandi. Unless you are a member of PP, or unless you explicitly show your loyalty to Abiy Ahmed's group, you are treated like an enemy. If you're not with us, you are against us. So they have always been doing what they say now they're going to do, as if they haven't. No, look, we can count thousands and thousands of Oromo parents who faced atrocities from Ethiopia just because their children were perceived to have joined the Oromo Liberation Army. Forget about those who've joined the Oromo Liberation Army. Even those who have nothing to do with the Oromo Liberation Army. And in fact, those who, who stand against the policy of armed confrontation, they have not been spared by Abiy Ahmed's government. Look what they've been doing to those people who said they want to engage in peaceful dialogue. I'm not just referring to the likes of Bate Ogeza, whom they murdered cold-blooded. I'm talking about their very own members, the likes of Taye Denda, the very right-hand man of Abiy Ahmed at one point, who even went extra miles to dehumanize the Oromo Liberation Army. And later on, just because he happened to regain some level of conscience, and then he spoke a word or two against Abiy Ahmed, and he ended up in jail. So one, they want to rule by fear. They want to continue control by inflicting those kinds of violence on people, by instilling fear, and continue to do what they are doing. Apart from that, I mean, they have always been doing what they said. Now in their declaration, and it's laughable. You know, sometimes these people, you wonder their sanity. I mean, for Abiy Ahmed, I guarantee you, he is insane. That insanity is not just coming from his narcissistic nature. It is deeply ingrained in the very system, in the very system of Ethiopia itself. So I'm not surprised they have declared what they declared, because they have already been doing it. And it's, let me finish by saying this: how many times have they declared that they were going to eradicate the Oromo Liberation Army within 30 days time? Many times. The more they tell lies, the more they say we are going to get rid of the Oromo Liberation Army within a short period of time, the Oromo Liberation Army are growing, in multiple folds. That tells you one thing. It tells you the fact that every Oromo are now coming to realize that their life is not safe. It's not about, it's not just about bringing about political change. It's not just about decolonizing Oromia. Now, what the people have got to is, well, can I go out and come back alive? Can I go to my work and come back alive? That's the extent to which the brutality of Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed have reached.
So let me take you back to the negotiation between the OLA, and the Ethiopian government that took place. The second round, especially, started in Geneva in October and lasted up to November 7th. And during that part of the negotiation, the Ethiopian government was said to have demanded demobilization, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, DDR. But the OLA delegate rejected that and presented the proposal, an alternative proposal. They call it RRI, which is refreshment, retraining, and integration, in which they detail that from both sides, from the government side as well as from the OLA, the forces have to be disarmed and combined, retrained and refreshed, and eventually a national army that's neutral from the influence of any of the party should be created, and democratic and independent national institution should be established. That was the proposal from the OLA delegates. But the government, so at the end, the government accepted the RRI, and the mediators decided they have to go to Tanzania and iron out this and discuss about the implementation. When they went to Tanzania at the final part of the second round of negotiation, the government reverted back to DDR again and rejected the proposal from the OLA delegate, which ended the second round of negotiation. So the government knows that the OLA have time and again clearly stated that they are not willing to disarm, demobilize. Why the government insists on DDR? That indicate that the government is not willing to resolve the political crisis of Ethiopia.
Well, it's self-explanatory. The government of Prosperity Party, led by Abiy Ahmed, they can't survive unless they manufacture, unless they produce violence, unless they produce conflicts here and there. They practically are conflict entrepreneurs. They are genocide entrepreneurs. This is, I mean, from that peace negotiation, what you clearly see is that either Ethiopia cannot entertain peace by any means. That's what it shows. And it also shows, but by the way, that process, what happens throughout that negotiation process, was very, very vindicative of the Oromo Liberation Army. I mean, the Oromo Liberation Army came very, very big on that, because it happened in the presence of representative of the global community. It happened in the watch of the international community. When they initially, the delegates of Ethiopia and the Oromo Liberation Army, they worked very hard, in reaching to that point of, agreeing on RRI. That took, from what the commander of the Oromo Liberation Army explained, that took long time, and it took resources of not just the Oromo Liberation Army or and of Ethiopia's government, but also it took resources from the global actors who were involved in that process. And they worked, they agreed on that principle and on those policy matters. And then after they concluded everything in Geneva, when, like you explained, another round was arranged to, like I said, to iron out things and to make it more practical. It was at that point when, perhaps in my informed guess, Abiy Ahmed did not think, he initially did not think things could be taken seriously. Okay, he had been trying before that. He had been trying to lure the leaders of the Oromo Liberation Army, saying, "Come on, we give you this, we give you that." But he realized that the Oromo Liberation Army's leaders were determined to their cause, and then he let the delegates do what they did, and finally he realized that this process is bringing about something significantly positive towards peace, and he aborted it. He practically aborted it. I mean, they only received a phone call from Abiy Ahmed and, said, what you're talking about. Everything they had worked together, they agreed on it, on negotiating tables. And all of a sudden, they received a phone call from Abiy Ahmed and said, no, we're not going ahead with what we agreed to go ahead. And that was a disastrous blow for the government of Abiy Ahmed. While on other, the Oromo Liberation Army came out victorious because the world have seen that the Oromo Liberation Army are determined for peaceful, for matters to be concluded peacefully. They went extra miles to show that, and then the government of Ethiopia refused to put into practice what they already agreed on. So that's why I said it was really, really vindicative of the Oromo Liberation Army on one hand, and on the other hand, it shows, it has, accentuated the evil nature of Abiy Ahmed and Ethiopia. Who, it's only evils who wouldn't like peace. It's only evils who wouldn't like stability. So that's why I repeatedly said, you can't find any peace-loving element in the DNA of Ethiopia or Abiy Ahmed. Perhaps Abiy Ahmed's fear was, okay, if that RRI was signed, become a treaty, and under the observation of international community, if that was to be implemented, it was going to bring about, significantly sustainable level of peace. And if peace prevails, they fear for they might lose power, and that means if the defense force, the way it was suggested by the Oromo Liberation Army, is transformed and an independent, credible defense force is established, that would be a threat for Abiy Ahmed and his group, because they don't like institutions. They don't like, control. They don't like system. What they want is just the gullible structure where they can do whatever they want to do. And you've seen what his answers were when he was asked questions about the billions dollars worth projects in the parliament. The members of parliament asked him, are the money for these projects coming through the proper channel, and are they audited? And he outrightly he insulted members of the parliament. He told them, that's none of your business. That's none of your business. The parliament is supposed to be the supreme sources of power. So what Abiy Ahmed wants is that kind of structure, where he is treated like everything. So if peace prevails, he wouldn't be able to do what he has been doing. So he inherently is scared of peace. That is what the world have seen. That is what particularly the entities that facilitated the the peace deal in Tanzania, and in fact in Geneva, have learned. I mean, they were speechless when they decided to go back, and they decided to cancel basically the ticket they themselves booked with regard to peace. And so that's what the world can see, and that's what I can also say about it.
On the other hand, as we all know, the Ethiopian government, the Prosperity Party, that rules Ethiopia right now, has been has been saying the national dialogue, and it's been over a year right now since they started talking about that, and they have even established some branches in overseas, and they have been discussing about that. They have created a commission, and recently the OLA higher command, the OLA commander, John Morrow, gave some press release about that, and it detailed how the commission was established. Members of the commission were selected without inviting, without negotiations with the stakeholders, especially opposition political parties. And the OLA said that it should have been established through a negotiation with the main political parties, including the armed movement, but the Ethiopian government single-handedly assembled the members of the commission, and thus it cannot be trusted. It would be independent and neutral to chart the way forward for the Ethiopian crisis. And so it's unlikely we will resolve any problem. And on one hand, the government has already rejected negotiations with the OLA. And why would it bother to establish a commission for what reason? And it's unlikely to resolve the political problem of the country, leaving out the armed forces. But still, the government is wasting funding and time on establishing a national dialogue commission and members of the commission. And according to the oil, it says the purpose is one to resemble the Japan government's trying to resolve the problem, so as to get some fungible funds from Western nations in the Bretton Woods, and then by continue the work that it is conducting in Oromia, elsewhere in Ethiopia. Why the government wasting so much time and fund on creating national dialogue that is not going to resolve the Ethiopian crisis? Isn't this a wasted opportunity when we compare to South Africa, for example? The apartheid era government decided to give up and negotiate with the ANC, and now we see that South Africa has moved a lot forward, and economically they are doing well. In terms of democracy, they are doing much better relative to elsewhere in the continent. They are like up in terms of democracy. And why does the Ethiopian government and the government of Abiy Ahmed waste this opportunity to transform Ethiopia and resolve once and for all the political crisis by, sitting at the same level as political forces that have been fighting against the successive Ethiopian regime, such as the Oromo Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Army, and other
First, Daniel, first of all, national dialogue is very effective tool if implemented, if utilized as a very useful tool that helped, many nations bring about positive change, bring about peace, solve problems. It's very good problem solving tool. That is only if it is implemented. At the core of the concept of national dialogue is that all parties that are in conflict should leave arms, put down arms, and talk about peace and talk to each other. Basically, it's about, it starts by talking to each other. And on one hand, you can't.
While discussing about this, can you also discuss about the context? Because the Ethiopian government says we are entitled to violence and we are the only one entitled to violence in the country because we are government. So we have to, I think, discuss about the context in which the current Ethiopian government took power and states in power. Especially if you go back and look at the election, was it free? Was it fair? Were there independent political organizations who participated without, pressure from the government? If you can touch.
Well, I wouldn't call what happened was an election. Election, involves at least two competing parties, two competing entities. But when it comes to the Prosperity Party, they competed among themselves. They appointed themselves, basically. They what they did was they made sure no opposition political party could participate in that process, and the only political parties that participated in that process in the election were those parties created by PP itself. The likes of Aben, the Amhara National Movement, and who else? The party of Branu Nega, which is nicknamed Branu's PLC. That's it. I mean, in Oromia, they made sure that no opposition political party could participate. They've made it difficult, too difficult for OLF to participate in the election. They made it too difficult, almost impossible for the for Kafao to participate in that process. And so
Oromo Federalist Congress, yeah?
Yeah, the Oromo Federalist Congress. So, I mean, these are very, very big political parties who were not even interested in armed struggle. The ones who say we can change, we can bring change in peaceful ways. By doing what they did to those political parties, again, Ethiopia of Abiy Ahmed reaffirmed to the world that they are anti-peace, basically. So coming back to the national dialogue, I mean, it's disrespectful, it's disgrace, for them to even mention national dialogue. In order for national dialogue to happen, all parties, all stakeholders, one, have to make commitment to solve problems via dialogue, by dialogue. And two, there has to be some level of genuinity. They have to show that they are committed in real good faith to bring about change. Well, but when it comes to Ethiopia, or when it comes to Abiy Ahmed, are they really committed to bring about peace? No. What happened? What we just a few minutes ago we discussed about what transpired with the Oromo Liberation Army, and in order for national dialogue to bring change, parties at least need to recognize each other's cause. At least, okay, I recognize your pain. I recognize, your the things that you are standing for. But how can we meet halfway through? How can we give and take through the discussions? That is, I think, the essence of national dialogue. But what they're doing now is they say they are committed. They want to facilitate national dialogue. But on the other hand, in action, everything that they've been doing is contrary. Is contrary to not only national dialogue, but to any kind of peaceful negotiations. Why do they do this? I think why in the first place Abiy Ahmed's government established this so-called committee is perhaps Abiy's intention could be to utilize this so-called National Dialogue Committee and inject his evil interests. Perhaps they might be cooking something. Perhaps they want to dissolve the federal arrangement. They want to say, oh, we made this national dialogue, and the outcome of this negotiation is all the parties that were involved in the national dialogue have come to the conclusion that the root cause of the problems is the ethnic federalism. Therefore, the solution, the way out, is to dissolve the ethnic federalism, and perhaps they want to change the constitution. There are some indications that Abiy Ahmed was interested in doing that. Perhaps change the federal structure itself and transform it to change it to the presidential system. One good thing about Abiy Ahmed is whenever he wants to do something, well, everything he does is evil. Whenever he wants to engage in something very catastrophic, he tells you. He tells you up front. And if he says something negative in public, I trust him. He will do it. He will do it. Because, he said he would eliminate OLF, and the way to eliminate OLF is by wiping out the Oromo. He has been doing it. He said he will destroy Tigray if the Tigray people go ahead with this election. He practically destroyed it. And it's like I said, it's only because of the challenge posed by the Oromo Liberation Army that they have not been able to wipe out the Oromo. Otherwise, they would do what they said would do. So the point I'm trying to make is Abiy Ahmed has indicated in several speeches that he will change the constitution, and the federal system is not good. And through his cliques, through Abiy Ahmed's cliques, if you've seen what's going on around the social media, if you gauge, they're saying, "Oh, one Ethiopia, we have to get back to one Ethiopia," and he's also using his slings, such as Jawar Muhammad, and who gave an interview on Addis Standard, who said ethnic federalism is is a problem for Ethiopia. So when you join these dots, I think Abiy Ahmed is intending to use this so-called national dialogue, which has nothing to do with national dialogue, and he has established some kind of committee, and he wants to utilize and manipulate that committee and bring something that could be even more disastrous. Otherwise, you don't see anything, you don't smell any of that to do with national dialogue. I mean, if the Oromo Liberation Army are not involved, the Oromo Liberation Front are not involved, the Oromo Federalist Congress are not involved, the TDF are not involved, who are they going to make national dialogue with? It's just, I mean, well, we shouldn't undermine Abiy Ahmed. He is going to use this committee. I mean, he cannot deceive the international community. I mean, gone are the days of Abiy Ahmed, to deceive the international community. I mean, particularly after the recent fiasco they faced in Tanzania. The international community they don't stand any chance of getting deceived by Abiy Ahmed anymore. This you can see the various reports, the UN, the US State Department's recent reports on human rights situation in Ethiopia, and particularly in Oromia region. They went. That report detailed that Ethiopia is engaging in ethnic cleansing. Ethiopia is engaging in massive arbitrary mass arrest, kidnapping, extrajudicial killings, and even they explained how the Abiy Ahmed's government used aid food, wheat that were sent for people in need, were sold out to exported to Kenya and Somalia. So they have lost trust from the international community. Now they are trying to pretend they are engaging in this kind of process. Unless they deceive themselves, I don't think they can deceive the international community.
Thank you, Denabo. Now I'll take you back to the assassination of Bate Ogesa. As we all know, Abate Ogesa was a military officer of the Oromo Liberation Front, and he was based in the capital, and he was assassinated on the evening of April 9, and his body was discovered on April 10th. Bate Ogesa was a very succinct and very eloquent political commentator and political analyst, and he used to speak to power without any fear. And he was eliminated and but he was very humble person. Um, uh, the Ethiopian government decided to get rid of Baterugesa. Anyways, it was coordinated. It was premeditated. It was planned because the government forces, according to these standards, a recent report, the Ethiopian government security forces stopped any movement of vehicle in the Maki town, in the town on which Bat was assassinated. And on that evening, some eyewitnesses whom the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission interviewed said that the security forces took him out of pickup truck and killed him point blank. Um, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission quit its investigation into the assassination of Batte Orgesa after finding out after the witnesses implicated the Ethiopian government security forces as the perpetrators. Um, so from this, what we see is the Japan government continues to kill prominent individuals as well as everyday members of the Oromo community, and nobody is held accountable. And this is continuing from day to day. Even today, the news that FNN News Network received says that Japan security forces killed a young man about 20 years old in Jeldu district in West Java zone. So the killing machine of the Japan government continues to get rid of people that it views as a threat to this government. And this has no end and it's continued from day to day. When we compare the Ethiopian government with the Oromo Liberation Army, we remember that the OLF leader Jalmaro at some point convened the military leaders to go back and clean up the rank and files of the Oromo Liberation Forces after the government tried to implant its own, criminals, its own agencies in the Oromo Liberation Army to tarnish the image of the OLA. They, being a government, the Ethiopian government has not come forward and spoken and kind of apologized to the public about it is, the track record of killing innocent civilians. In the, I think it was December of 2021, the Ethiopian security forces massacred the Karayu Oromo Bagada leaders. If I'm correct, I think that was December, around December 3, 2021. And since then, it has continued. The assassination and politically premeditated murder of civilians have continued, and this is ongoing. And why has the Japan government choose to do that? And what political objective can it accomplish with this? And that's one of my questions. The other is the international community as well as other stakeholders have just criticized the Ethiopian government. They call the Ethiopian government to lead independent investigation into especially the assassination of Batte Orgesa. But as we know, there is an ongoing murder of civilians, and nobody says anything about that. Even today, the Ethiopian government security forces have murdered a young man who is just 20 years old. And so, is there any turning point that we can see in the future where the global community, powerful nations, and political, institutions, democratic institutions across the world can say enough and let's hold the Ethiopian government accountable to this, outright crime that the regime is conducting right now? Is there going to be anytime in the future when the democratic institution would hold its Ethiopian government accountable. Recently, we heard that human rights organizations have submitted the periodic report on the human rights track record of the Ethiopian government to the UN Universal Periodic Review. Would that result in the UN holding the Ethiopian government to account, or this is going to continue without having any implication on the Ethiopian government's, pattern of this impunity?
For viewers and listeners who might not know Bater Gesa, Bater Gesa is one of the senior officers of the Oromo Liberation Front. We're not talking about Oromo Liberation Army, we're talking about the Oromo Liberation Front, the organization under the leadership of Daud Ibsa, who made a commitment, who said we can bring about change in a peaceful way, and detached themselves from the Oromo Liberation Army. So Bater Gesa is one of those officers. If we put it in wider perspective, Bater Gesa is one of the Oromo elites who ardently believed that the problem of Oromo and Oromia, and in fact of that of Ethiopia, could be solved in peaceful way. And he's very eloquent, well-read, well-versed individual. Just before his assassination on this program, we talked about him, didn't we? When he was last arrested and detained only because he happened to sit down with a French journalist who was interviewing him in a hotel suite, and the Ethiopian security forces stormed the area and arrested both Bate and the French journalist. And a few days later, the French journalist was released. In fact, because he's got a country that would stand up for its citizens. It's got the government that is accountable to its citizens, and they managed to secure his release within a short period of time. The poor guy Bate, he remained in the torture chamber, and it was only less than a month after his release that he was assassinated. So the reason why they released him was perhaps, by the way, Abiy Ahmed and his team are always infuriated by the caliber of Bater Gesa, because he showed them in their, in the media platform or whatever, that he is a capable politician. So ultimately, they assassinated him. Now, if you put this in bigger perspective, Bate's assassination is part of the implementation of the strategy of Abiy Ahmed. We have to get rid of the fish in order to, we have to dry up the sea in order to get rid of the fish. That means it's the same thing they've declared against the Oromo. It is part of implementation of Abiy Ahmed's policy of wiping out the Oromo or eliminating the ONF. That is how they want to eliminate the ONF. They eliminated Bate because Bate is an Oromo, because Bate is a peaceful politician, mature politician. We're talking about Bate because Bate is an icon. He was an icon, and he's known by many around the world. Do you know? Informations reveal that in connection with Bate's assassination, after they've assassinated Bate, the Ethiopian government security forces have killed more than 10 other people in that same small town. Some of them were killed because they were eyewitness. They saw the Ethiopian army killing Bate, and others were killed because they had perceived relationship with Bate, and others were killed because of the perceived support they were perceived to have given support to the Oromo Liberation Army. But the point I'm making is this: Bate's assassination and the killing of those 10 people, and the massacre, the Karayu massacre, the Karayu Oromo, the Gada leaders, the massacre, and the killing that is taking place in every village of Oromia as we speak. You mentioned the young person that was killed today. Perhaps hundreds of others who might have been killed but haven't hit the headline. People are being dragged from churches and massacred in broad daylight. All this is part of Ethiopia's strategy of forcing the Oromo Liberation Movement to surrender by conducting this level of killing, targeting the Oromo. So, having said that, at what stage does this stop? Or at what stage do the international community or the global community take action? Of course, the global community are aware of what is going on. They know. The report we mentioned earlier, the US State Department report, that details the genocidal atrocities Ethiopia has been conducting against the Oromo. The human rights reports, the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Freedom House, what have you. They know. The Western countries, their governments know. It's because they know what is happening. They've issued travel advice to their citizens. Britain has issued travel advice advising their citizens not to move around Oromia. The US, Canada, and the rest of them, all of them know. But what does it take for them to take action? Okay, now it seems their attention is busy focusing on the Gaza business, the Israeli, the Palestinian-Israeli thing, the Ukraine-Russian thing. They don't want to, because Africa is far, and in fact, some of them benefit from those kinds of conflicts going on. So when do they make intervention? When do they say enough is enough? Depends on the strength of the Oromo Liberation Army. It is when the Oromo strengthen their unity more and more, strengthen their defense force, the Oromo Liberation Army, then the international community will pay attention. We've seen what happened in Geneva and what happened in Tanzania. Ethiopia was forced to come and sit at the negotiation table. That is because of the commitment, because of the courage, because of the determination of the Oromo Liberation Army. So the ball is back in the Oromo's court. The Oromo have to continue to strengthen their defense force. And it's then, when you have a strong fist, your enemies will listen to you, your neighbors will listen to you, your others can also give you attention. And in order for that to happen, the Oromo each and every Oromo have to come to realization that everybody is operating under climate of fear. Everyone is facing an existential threat. It is, strengthening the Oromo Liberation Army. It's not, it is the only option we're faced with. Either strengthen your army, your defense, and defend yourself, or face the extermination. And otherwise, they don't hesitate to wipe out the Oromo. They are doing it, by the way. Now, the predicament for Ethiopia is they couldn't eradicate the Oromo. Countries have tried it, by the way. Whether we're talking about Australia, US, or Canada, they eradicated the indigenous people and established their own system. Australia, they eradicated the Aborigines and the Tasmanians. Okay? And when it comes to the Oromo, Ethiopia could not eradicate the Oromo. And Oromo will not stop fighting Ethiopia. So there will be no peace because Ethiopia cannot entertain peace. So the only solution is for the Oromo people to exercise their right to self-defense. And when will this end? It will only end when Ethiopia withdraws from Oromia. Otherwise, by just treating the symptom, it won't make any difference because these killings have been going on and on. And in fact, Ethiopia was conceived by violence killing the Oromo. And then the Haile Selassie regime came, continued the killing. Who toppled down the Haile Selassie regime? The Oromo. They fought and toppled down the Haile Selassie regime in broad daylight. But Haile Selassie's regime was replaced by the communist Mengistu. Ethiopia continued to feed on the Oromo. Then the Oromo fought. They toppled down the communist regime, the Mengistu. Then came TPLF or PDO, the same thing. Now, the PP who have, publicly declared they want to wipe out the Oromo. The reason why I'm mentioning all this is, as long as Ethiopia prevails in Oromia, the Oromo will not have peace unless the Oromo keeps quiet and surrender, completely surrender, give up everything. And I don't think that the Oromo will do that. So that is the solution. The point where this bloodshed will stop.
Thank you very much, Denabo Wario. My last question is, so recently it is reported that the Ethiopian government is forcibly enlisting minors who are 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old from schools, and it was widely reported, especially we have received from FNN that in the last couple of weeks, the government forcibly took kids and took them to military training camps. What is the implication of this? For me, it looks like so the Ethiopian government is at this point very desperate, and they has resorted to enlisting even minors. What is the wider implication of this in terms of its fighting capacity going forward?
Well, I mean, they may not admit it, but the Ethiopia's military capacity has deteriorated significantly as a result of the wars that have been going on in Oromia and later expanded north to Tigray, which was a very, very costly war. And in Amhara region, there is a war. So, I mean, millions have died, and the vast majority of those who died are combatants. And so I mean, the way they conduct the war is by foot soldiers. They haven't got advanced technologies, so they have to rely on foot soldiers, and these foot soldiers are, many of them are being captured, taken war prisoners. So in short, their manpower is deteriorating, and now they are resorting to forcing everybody. By the way, they have been doing it. They just round up young people in recreational areas. They gang up on them. They promise them, now we're going to take you to a factory where you work, and then they end up in military training camps where they are given basic trainings and then get deployed to battlefields. You've seen those Ethiopian soldiers that were captured by the Oromo Liberation Army as war prisoners. They're very young, and some of them were interviewed, and particularly by the Tigrayan Defense Force. They tell, the story that they tell is heartbreaking. Under 18, they rounded up, they were promised job, and then they effectively, they have been using young men and women as a cannon fodder. So they have to replace. Now that what they are trying to do is now forcing people. Abiy Ahmed's government, I think they've released circular to every district and every kabale. Kabale, by the way, for the English speakers, is the smallest administrative unit. They are instructed to capture certain number of young people, And if they fail, they were told they would take their place, and the leaders would go to battlefront. So because they rely on violence, and they have to have some force that can drive their violence, and that's why. And perhaps in the near future, they might introduce compulsory military service or conscription. That's one thing Abiy Ahmed could learn from his former friend, who he says he's a protege of. I'm talking about Isaias Afwerki. That could be a possibility. That could be a possibility. And he said it many times. He said it many times.
That has been Denabo Wario, recover from Wales, United Kingdom, and this program was presented to you in collaboration between Oromia National Media and FNN News Network. Denabo Wario, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, this has been our today's program with Denabo. So among the news that we had today, the Ethiopian government security forces killed a young man who was just 20 years old, named Tankolu Magarsa Abayi. He was shot dead close to a secondary school in Shukute town in Jaldo district, West Chagar zone of Oromia. During the same time, three Oromo youths were 14 years old, Abdi Salkala, Begi, and 18-year-old Elias Laun and Dabala militia Tagga were said to have been tortured by the Ethiopian security forces. The Ethiopian government has been rounding up the Oromo youths and taking them to military training camp, and the Ethiopian government continues to consider the Oromo youth as consumables, and to continue the area's government, to strengthen its government, and it relies on recruiting Oromo youth by force. And they, as Denabo pointed out, they are being used as cannon fodder, and they are being like a revolving door. They have been replaced when once that have been listed, either are captured or surrendered to the Oromo Liberation Front. The Ethiopian government replaces them with school children, and this has been ongoing for several months and years now. So this is the end of our today's program. Until we meet again in another program, I would say thanks so much for watching, and stay with us. Share our programs. If you have not so far subscribed to our programs and our channel, thank you very much.